During the NEL, we managed to get a measurement of the player's stats using this graph called a parameter, but in recent times we have not gotten any updated parameters to tell us what stats our blue lockers have as of recently. So today I decided to do God's work and not only provide updated parameters for blue lock players, but also the U20 club players, and today we will be covering two teams because both of these teams lack significant players to discuss individually, so I combined the two together for one video. These teams being Barcha FC and Manshine City. So before watching this video, let me know if you want more content like this by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. The support is greatly appreciated and is completely free. Also, be sure to join my Blue Lock Discord with the link left down below. Warning, all estimations and results are based on my opinion. Have an issue? Go cry about it. Let's kick off with the players from the teams we are covering who had previous parameters, starting off with Barcha's carry, Bachira. We can see that not only does Bachira have a normal graph, but he also has a full-blown detailed sheet. I'm not going to lie to you and say that I know what all of these stats contribute to in the primary 6, so I'll just be using the stats from the main parameters this video as I construct all the results on a FIFA card maker website. Bachira during his match against Munich had these stats: an 84 in speed, a 68 in defense, an 88 in passing, a 95 in dribbling, an 82 in shooting, and finally an 86 in offense, which led to a total stat overall of 86. We should all expect him by the end of the NEL to have climbed from this number to something much more substantial. Regarding Bachira's speed, we can say his speed has likely increased from the visible demonstration of how fast his dribbling pace was when soloing Manshine City. Staying in the range of A tier, I would like to give him a speed stat of 87. In defense, I don't think he should be in C tier any longer. He deserves more appreciation for his interception from Nagi's pass, so I would bump him up to a 72, but it's no surprise defense isn't his strong suit anyway. In passing, we can give him another S tier stat with his new passing stat total being a 90. In dribbling, I would say he's among the upper echelon of dribblers in the entire series, but he's also extremely high in that category already. But of course, considering his speciality is dribbling, and he joined a freedom-based team for specific development of this skill, I would give his current dribbling a 98. Room for improvement, as I believe there will be better U20 dribblers out there. For his shooting, he has obtained his own new shooting weapon, and likely has refined and improved in all of his shooting variations he has access to, leading me to give him an 85. And finally, for his offense, which mostly is contributed by his ability to push upfield with his dribbling, and how much pressure he puts on the opposing side with it, I gave him an improved 90 in this area. And regarding the stat totals, I will be covering the overall stat totals of every player at the end of the video, because calculating the stat totals deserves its own explanation entirely. Next up on our list is Chigiris. Here we see the former parameter sheet, and we can likely see a notable increase in some of these areas. For speed, Chigiris is already at 98, and if being fair, I believe for an additional 3 matches since his stats were first shown, he would likely have a 99 in speed now. For defense, I don't think he's done much for improvement. Yes, he's a good presser, and speed is definitely a notable quality to have for defense. However, it being a 68 to start with means that even with his speed, he isn't that valued for defending, and for him to not show off any significant defensive feats aside from stopping Baru's shot isn't enough for a big bump, but I will at least get his defense out of C tier with his new stat being 72. For Chigiris passing, we can assume he's likely not improved in this category a lot, but in the wise words of Ero, passing is just shooting where you instead aim at a player instead of the goal. Oh god, the amount of self-proclaimed football fans that would hate on that logic would be overwhelming. But yes, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I believe Chigiris still deserves an increase, even if the logic isn't that simplistic as he makes it sound. I would give Chigiris' new passing stat an 84. Remember, this is at the end of the NEL, so if he ends up doing a Panther snipe pass in the U20 World Cup, that's due to his training after the NEL. For Chigiris' dribbling, the improvement of his speed and physicality adds to his no slow down dribbling ability, and I believe that would put him at a 94 in dribbling at least. Then for his shooting, I could argue it is now at a 91. Considering he's now actually put into work his golden formula for scoring goals in matches, when starting to use it in a real match environment against Munich, and the fact that it's since been refined in other matches to make it harder to stop with likely more shot power and faster kick speed, makes a perfect argument to why he deserves a 91 in this stat. And for his offense, with it already being at 95, it's safe to say that speed in this case is shown to be more dangerous than dribbling. And since Chigiris has the proficient dribbling alongside having immense levels of speed, this offense can be bumped up to 97. Wow, Chigiris is looking insanely good. And yes, I also mean, alright, let's keep going. Reo is up next pace, and with his improved styles of football and his jack of all trades parameters to start with, managing to get into the mid-range A rank, his strong suits are now going to be shown more than ever before with these improvements. In his speed stat, I bumped this up to an 85 for physicality improvement since his first match. In his defensive stat, since part of his chameleon style focuses around defense as well as offense, Reo hasn't been a slouch in incorporating new defensive abilities into his plays with his improved physical specs, and not to mention metavision, leading me to bump him up to a 90. For passing, this is the most showcased area, but I don't think as of recently we have seen much improvement considering his methods have stayed quite stagnant when passing to someone like Nagi, so it led me to increase it very slightly to a 90. For his dribbling, I believe he definitely has the potential for way better dribbling abilities, especially now paired with metavision, but we haven't seen all too much comparatively, which is why I'll give him an 86. For shooting, he has not only gained more for his arsenal, especially after copying Otoyas' shooting weapon, but he also now actually scored in the NEL with the use of his own goal scoring potential, leading me to give him a huge bump to a 89 in this stat. And finally for offense, as I said earlier, it's part of his new style to be naturally versatile as a forward and a defender. Considering his other stat increases, this is another stat that desires an S tier rank, so I will give him yet another 90 in this section. We're gonna save Nagi for a little later in this video, so let's talk about our first non-blue locker. Agis is known as the man who knew too much, and considering that factor, he was purposely looked over as being a player even though he was the smartest man on that team. He's also my favourite blue lock character, so let's see what I can do for him as he has no original parameters to work with. For speed, he's shown clear feats of amazing lunges forward at high pace, even when being held back by other players. He is also paired with immense height, but travels at a lower centre of gravity when running, which is a clear sign of good starting running technique. I wouldn't say he's faster than Chigiris, however, or at least I'm saying that he's not faster than him in the long term. Short term, however, Agis looks to be way better with starting acceleration, so I will give Agis a 93 for speed. For defense, he hasn't shown much competency in this area, though he does great in pursuing high balls and taking them down with either his chest or legs mid-air. I'm not going to credit him much here because he's just not a defender, even if he has a very capable build for the position, so I will give him an 84 in this category. For passing, he's made some very amazing opportunities for the likes of Nagi, using flexibility in which seems inhuman, and also a very proficient back flick pass without much visibility directly into Nagi's area of retrieval, leading me to believe he's a midfielder who's more comfortable serving passes backwards than he is forwards to confuse opponents, so I will give him a 94 in this section. For dribbling, he's decent but hasn't had much time to show what he's capable of, but he did beat Kunigami in a matchup, and after that he was only stopped with the combined efforts of Isagi and Kaiser, with them using metavision. He also has experience using his hands to gauge distance or shut off opposing players like Karasu can, so I will give him a modest 88. For shooting, it's sort of a translatable stat. Considering his shot power and accuracy when passing in tight situations, I won't be against translating a fair amount over, even if he's never visually seen making a shot onto the goal, so I will give him an 89 in this section. And finally, to end off, we have offense. He is aware of open areas to retrieve the ball, so he is capable of using his physicality to not only outreach, but somewhat outmuscle the ball from opposing players. Not to mention, his level of natural athleticism and flexibility make it difficult to combat him when he retrieves the ball in the goal box. Plus, he plays as a centre forward, not shown to be someone who plays as a forward for goals, but who says that will stay the case when it comes time for him to face Blue Lock in the U20 World Cup. So I will give Agis a 91 in the offensive stat area, since he's also a man paired with strategies and creative freedom to provide to players he works with, much like he did with Nagi. Alright, we don't have too many left now. Let's quickly talk about Otoya. Otoya is no doubt one of the more speedy players in the facility. I mean, being able to take full advantage of blind spots requires the speed to be uncharted. I don't think outside of getting into the best positions, he's shown any other paceable challenges, but I think he should get a 90 in this section. For Otoya's defense, he once again can use blind spots to steal the ball quite effectively, but it's a downside to his playstyle considering he's at a disadvantage the more people who are focused on his presence, and strikers inherently have to be wary of every defender to get into the best goal scoring situation. Plus, Otoya doesn't have too many notable defensive feats, so just judging purely off a standard to at least be competent, I will give him a 71 in this section. Next, for his passing, he's able to pull off notable exchanges as we've seen with Barcha. We know this isn't his strongest attribute, and he only works well with someone like Barcha due to their chemistry and how Barcha individually can handle himself in pressuring circumstances. There's a few few characters in which could do Otoyas' job as a low presence passer better in the passing area, but I think he would become way better if he could do something like Kuriko from the Kuriko basketball series, where instead of retracting attention coming his way, he retains it and uses it as a beacon for everyone to no longer expect his teammates. Anyway, I'll give him an 83 for passing. For his dribbling, since being under the tutoring of the Barcha FC team, no, not Lavinho, that man definitely didn't do shit, we got to think it's pretty decent. He doesn't exactly have notable dribbling feats, but let's just find a good middle range and say 86 or something. Next for shooting, he's developed his own techniques and refined it to a point where he's gotten 2 goals in the NAL, which is impressive for such a highly competitive environment. I will give him an 86 for this category. And finally, in offense, this is where that off the ball movement and blind spot weapon really comes in handy. Being in the best positions possible, constantly being a threat when on the opposing team's goal box, and not being as detectable as the majority of the other players really gives Otoya an edge in getting a good score for this attribute, which is why I'm going to give him a very solid 92 for offense. And that's our Reject Ninjaga Green Ninja done. Hope playing football was better than beating the Overlord and becoming the world's hero. Maybe then he could get some bitches. And finally on our list of characters to go through in this video is Nagi Seishiro, and I debated whether or not I would do this in a contrasting way. Every character thus far have naturally seen increases to their stats, but since Nagi's loss in motivation and then further complacency, making mistake after mistake with chance after chance and not performing anywhere close to the standard of his first NEL showing, I pondered on the reality of maybe his stats going down. So let's see how you guys take what I drafted up for Nagi in the state in which he was at the end of the NEL. For his speed stat, I saw no reason to increase or decrease this parameter. Without intense training, he likely just maintained his pace over the majority of matches or just increased in stamina and lacked sharpening in acceleration, which is an even trade-off I expect. In defense, I personally foresee this decreasing due to not really being in the position to necessarily do anything to show us why he's proficient. But he's also made some horrible efforts to stop many players, and Reo and Chigiri are usually the characters to pick up his slack, leading me to decrease his defense to a 72. In passing, I'd argue this one really depends on who he passes to, but he managed to make good exchanges with Agis and Chigiri in the last Manshine game, and his blunder passing to Reo was not because it was a bad pass, it was just that it was predictable. And overall, his trapping makes for amazing passing potential as we saw a few times in the series, so I'll bump up his pass slightly to an 87. His subsequent abandonment in a football that starts with him frankly high-roaded the zero reset turn and by extension his own creativity to help him score. And dribbling is especially for the creatively free most frequently. So with Nagi unwilling to create his own football, only frankly made his study in dribble less progressive, so it leads me to give him an 83 in this stat. For his shooting, considering his 5-stage Vic volley was conceded after the parameters were revealed, can we really say his shooting has gotten worse? Well, he had a temporary fire, so I believe that switch went on and off, so now he's back to his original capabilities, since he has not yet had the chance to shoot any shot without impending risk. And finally, his offense. Sadly, as I said for dribbling, it's just worse because he utilized his creativeness less, which coincidentally gave him less tools at his disposal as a centre forward. Him getting upfield was all due to passes and one super goal situation, so now he deserves to be an 89 in this category. And that's all of our characters. Let's figure out the stat overalls, but how do we calculate such a number? Well, I'm gonna be honest, this section of the video became much longer than it should have been, and personally, it won't be too engaging to put together when I eventually get to editing this. So to summarize, I had to put together my own educated estimations in the form of suitable guesses on what I think is reasonable to hand out. If you want to see the results of my labour, check the pinned comment on this video in the comment section and read what I looked into to come to this conclusion of why I'm using this approach. So in order, I gave Bachira a stat total of 90, I gave Chigiri a stat total of 93, I gave Reo a stat total of 89, I gave Agis a stat total of 92, for Otoya I gave him a stat total of 86, and finally for Nagi I gave him an overall stat total of 90. A decrease of course in representation of his declining performance, and remember these stat total overalls don't always indicate who a better player is. Bachira and Nagi being tied means nothing if one is more competent on his own in one stat to outperform the other player in his stats. And that is the video. Let me all know if you want a part 2 of this video series with a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and until next time, peace.